in Singapore, people want to take the easy option. Please don't do what your parents advise you to do.
Many people characterize you as someone who is like pro-China or pro-Chinese. Do you agree with that kind of characterization? Hey everybody, thanks for joining us on another episode of Help Desk. As you can see, we have a few changes from what was the previous episode. First of all, we have this really nice set given to us by Scanteak, so thank you to our friends at Scanteak. And then the other new thing is we have two, what are we calling you guys? Interns, helpers? Sidekicks, yeah. Sidekicks with us today. We have Chris and we have Alfie. Why don't you guys tell us a bit about who you are? I guess your name, I've said your name, Chris. And your favorite color?
Okay. Hi guys, my name is Priscilla, but usually people call me Pris. And my favorite color, nowadays I'm feeling like cherry red.
Ooh.
Yeah, like just
show your nails.
Yes, classic cherry red nails. Yes, just very classic and very simple.
Very nice. And then we have Alfie, which is short for Alfonso. That's correct, right?
Sure, whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alfie. My favorite color, super basic, like green. Like
Okay.
any shade of green.
Any shade?
Except like army green, because like like the admin tee is like
No.
no. It's
Why?
like,
What's wrong with admin tea?
like kind of dirty green, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what's the worst shade of admin green of like that tea? It's when it's been washed too much and then it's like
It's
really
faded.
Yeah, gross. Yeah, it grosses me out as well.
Like grass green.
Like dying grass.
Dying
green.
grass green. No water.
Yeah. Without the smell of that green.
No water.
Just dehydrated grass.
Okay, what do you guys want to talk about? We've got like a few minutes before our guest comes in. What are you doing on the weekend? What would you do on the weekend, Pris?
This weekend,
Yeah, not Friday, after Friday. Friday onwards. I know what you're doing on Friday.
Friday onwards. Oh, I don't know what's up with the season, but I think everyone's sick now. Like, is it? I don't know if it's the air or it's just Singapore or the weather, but everyone's just
Well,
sick.
like a flu, a cold or something?
A flu, a cold,
Wow.
and a sore throat. Right? Yeah. So I've been sick for like the past 2 weeks. So last week after National Day, I finally had like 2 days of rest and. We're back again this
after
week.
passing it to like a couple of people.
Yes,
Yeah, in
after
the office.
passing it, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. So I get it and then I pass it on to other people. And then, yeah, it just continues. But I think I feel better now. Feel a bit better. But yeah.
It's good. Yeah, we don't want to pass that to our guests today either.
Should I
Yeah.
want a mask?
No, that's fine. No mask, no. How about you, Alfie? What will you do on the weekend?
I had a pickleball game on.
Pickleball?
You want to play, right?
Yeah, I really want to play pickleball. I texted you. I like replied your message. You never replied me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But I mean, we don't have to play pickleball if you don't want to.
No, I want to
Oh, we
play with
can?
you.
Yeah,
but
okay.
like serious though. I'm like serious.
I'm
I'm going to the Olympics in 2028. That's my goal.
It's not an Olympic sport yet,
But
right?
like, if
But
you
it's
think
getting
about
there.
it, like LA,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they pick pickleball?
Yeah, it's because it's
you know?
massive in the States,
Yeah.
isn't it? Where do you play pickleball in Singapore?
Different CCs. So
Okay.
like, you can book it through Active SG. It sounds like an ad.
Yeah.
Is that it?
And what are you playing? You're playing it with like a bunch of 60 and 80-year-olds or what?
No, I play my mom, and you love my mom.
Yeah,
right?
I do enjoy your mom. Yeah. I mean, I do enjoy.
I think you gotta cut this.
I do appreciate your mother. Yes, that's correct. That's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. And I only play my mom, and it's like fun because like it's like bonding time.
Yeah.
But like she doesn't play by the rules.
What do you mean?
Like if I hit like too far and like she doesn't get the ball, then she'll be like, oh my god, like the sun is in my eyes, or like
Is she very competitive?
I think I'm more competitive than her.
Okay. Did you get it from your mom? Because you're pretty competitive.
I am pretty. I think so. Yeah. My dad's a super good like tennis player, so he comes and like teaches us.
Wow.
And then like my mom just like, I already know how to do it. Yeah.
Okay, our guest today is a veteran diplomat and a public intellectual who has written 10 books, including his newly published title, Living in the Asian Century, an Undiplomatic Memoir. He has articles published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Financial Times, and Foreign Affairs. Most importantly, he is the guest that my stepmom was most excited about. She told me to send her the link to the episode as soon as it comes out. So on behalf of my stepmom, Auntie Janet, thank you so much for coming on Help Desk, Prof Kishore Mahbubani.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Prof, are you someone that people go to for advice often?
No.
No? You don't give much advice?
No, I think most of the time people come to me very eagerly, trying to find out what's really happening in the world.
Yeah.
So they want to figure out, why is the war in Gaza lasting so long? Will Russia win or lose in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Will there be war in Taiwan? So those are the questions that I get asked.
Okay.
But not many people come to me and say, how do I get a promotion?
Would you prefer to be asked those kind of questions a bit more?
I mean, I don't mind being asked that kind of questions, but I cannot claim to be an authority in the field of self-help, because if you read my memoirs, you find that I made lots of mistakes. I accumulated detractors
Yeah.
effortlessly
Yeah. Yeah.
throughout my career. So I can't say that I can give much advice in that dimension.
Okay. And what has been the best advice that anyone has given you over your career and your life?
Actually, it wasn't. I've been quite successful. I mean, to be very honest. And the question is, why did I succeed?
Yeah.
It wasn't advice. It was the time that Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, and S. Rajaratnam spent with me. They would engage me in very deep conversations. And I wasn't aware then, consciously aware, that in the process of these deep conversations, I was actually learning a hell of a lot. And if I hadn't had these deep conversations with Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee and Rajaratnam, I could not have written 10 books.
Okay.
So in some ways, I owe a massive debt to these three people.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you ready to have a deep conversation with Alfie, Pris, and I today, so that we can learn from you?
Absolutely.
Maybe write 10 books or so. Like
Yeah.
you can read 11,
Yeah.
11 books.
I won't charge you my usual fees.
That's good to know. That's good to know. I mean, earlier I mentioned my stepmom, right, in the introduction for you.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, when I told people over the weekend and even last week when we were planning this interview that I was speaking to you, like, and I would say people of older, like from the generation before me especially, they were very excited to hear your views on things. Yeah, why do you think that is? Why do you think you're so popular with, especially older people?
Well, I think somehow or other, from a very young age, and I mentioned in my memoirs, I was the editor of the student newspaper Singapore undergrad, and then I learned that if you write something very strong and very provocative, you get noticed.
Okay.
In fact, as I confess in the book, if I hadn't written an article criticizing Mr. Lee Kuan Yew directly and accusing him of becoming a potential dictator, then I think the leaders wouldn't have noticed me. So in some ways, you've got to take a risk.
Yeah.
If you write too provocatively, you can be smashed down. So I was lucky. I was noticed, but I wasn't smashed down.
There you go, Alfie. Write something provocative and maybe you'll get
Wow, am I allowed to?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Depends what
Try
it is.
Yeah.
Hey, run it by Prof Kishore first before you publish
Before Martino, run it through
Yeah,
first. Yeah.
it. Okay, Prof, are you ready to tackle some of the questions that our audience have written to us about? Yeah, before we get into it, if you guys have questions at home, that you have anything about your life, any life decisions that you are making right now, you can write to us at the link that's on the screen, or you can find that same link in the show description. Write to us there. It's a Google form, and hopefully we'll get someone, as intelligent as Prof Kishore to answer these questions in the future. Okay, the first question, this one comes from Bonnie. And Bonnie writes, I am taking my A-levels this year, but I'm not sure what to do afterwards. My parents are adamant that I go to university and study something like finance or accounting or engineering, but to be honest, I don't have the feel for any of those things, and I would much rather study something related to humanities or social sciences. In fact, I don't even know if I want to go to university in the first place. Is it still important in this day and age to get a degree? Is it still important in this day and age to get a degree? Prof, what do you think? I mean, you might be a bit biased because you're a dean, or you helped set up the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Is it still important to get a degree?
Yes. You see, the good thing about me is I've probably visited more countries and met successful people in all corners of the world.
Yeah.
And you have to have a certain basic level of understanding of the world before you can succeed in this world. And university prepares you for that. But Bonnie, right?
Bonnie.
Bonnie, I would say, please don't do what your parents advise you to do.
Okay, wow.
Because it's a huge mistake to spend years studying a subject that you don't enjoy. And I almost did that. I also thought that I should go into economics and do something practical and sensible.
Yeah.
But after my second year, I actually decided to repeat a year and drop economics and go and study philosophy, which I was passionate about. And everyone told me that philosophy is a complete waste of time. You can't get a good job. You can't make good money. And I was making a big mistake. But at the end of the day, I did it not for practical reasons. I fell in love passionately with the subject of philosophy. And if you study something you're passionate about, you're more likely to excel in it.
Yeah.
And it's better to excel in the field rather than to sort of do something because you think it's practical. And I think that's one big mistake that parents make, to try and force their children to do practical things. And at the end of the day, the children will not be better off.
Yeah, yeah. Alfie, you've been to university, right? Like, how did you make that decision?
To decide on what I was
Yeah, what you're going to study?
grades,
Grades?
my overall score. Yeah, but I mean, I studied like in the arts as well. So I studied sociology and I loved it. I studied sociology and economics. So it's kind of like a balance between like practical and like what I loved. I scored in economics. I didn't really score as well in sociology.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
I didn't get economics at all, to be honest. Like, I enjoyed reading books about it, but like in university, I found it really hard to grasp.
Yeah, actually, in my first year, I did economics, sociology, and philosophy. In my second year, I did economics, sociology, and philosophy. Then I repeated and I went back to philosophy. But I enjoyed sociology a great deal too.
How did you decide between sociology and philosophy?
Well, I think, to be honest, the teachers. And I had some very passionate teachers in the Department of Philosophy. One of them was Dr. Colin Davis. And in those days, by the way, Singaporean, maybe I'm not allowed to say this on Mothership. In the old days, the professor smoked in the classroom.
Oh, yeah?
And Colin Davis used to smoke what he taught us. But you get so deep in thought, you go like this. And then suddenly you realize his hair is on fire.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And I think twice or thrice the students rushed up to put out the fire in his hair. He burned his hair. Literally got fire.
Gosh.
I mean, the cigarette is there. Of course, your hair catches fire. Try it.
And he never panicked at all when this was happening?
No, he didn't panic at all. Because he was so... You see, what I learned from Colin Davis... that when you get passionately involved in a very complex argument, his brain really focused totally on that argument.
Yeah.
And, that kind of passion for learning, for study, is not often encountered in Singapore. And so I felt that this person opened a window for me and said, wow, you can really get so engrossed in something.
Yeah. Chris, you haven't gone to uni yet, right?
No, I've not. I'm actually taking my gap year now and I'm planning to go to uni, but I think I'm kind of in the same position as Bonnie. It's like I'm questioning like whether I really need to go to uni, but I mean, I think I grew up in that era where everyone's going to uni and that's like kind of the standard for everyone to excel in life. And how like a degree holder is technically like you're more educated than a diploma holder. So I grew up in that era, and but I guess as I grew up, I'm also starting to kind of weigh out the pros and cons of like working in the industry versus like pursuing my studies. So I think a lot of the people around my age were still venturing, and we're still like weighing out what's really important to us, and whether the things that we choose in life like really match up with what we're gonna do in life. So personally, for me, I would still want to go to uni.
Yeah.
It's just how do I align like what I want, and like how do I get there, you know? Because like, I feel like it's very difficult to get into good unis now with the competitiveness and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of like different factors as to whether people my age at least should pursue their studies in uni.
Can I add something there? I would say one thing that I notice is that quite often in Singapore, people want to take the easy option. I would say consider taking the difficult option. I mean, just give it a try. You know, you may not succeed. Okay, never mind. But at least give it a try and enjoy the trying. And then it's okay to fall and start again. You know, but don't sort of assume that you got to try and find the easiest way and so on and so forth. Because the people who've been in life very, very successful, and I've had the great fortune of meeting the very, very successful people in the world. They succeed because they're willing to take risks that others don't want to take. At the end of the day, you know, they're prepared to take a big risk and maybe try and study an extremely difficult subject, but because they're passionate about it, you know. And that's what I would say is very important to succeed. And in Singapore, the problem is, you know, everything is so comfortable. And there isn't that much fire in the belly among young Singaporeans, I find. And we need to somehow or other light up that fire in the belly and encourage Singaporeans to take more risks if they're really going to succeed in life.
So two kind of follow-up questions on all this. Do you think it is better to go to obviously it's better to go to a university for a better reputation, but does that matter that much nowadays, you think? Or just get the degree from any university?
Well, no, I think it does. Don't forget that if you go to a better university, it's better endowed, it recruits better professors. And the better the professors, at the end of the day, you learn from the professors, the better the education that you have. But of course, at the same time, as an aside, now the most leading American universities are going through almost like an existential crisis.
Okay.
They're really struggling to figure out where they should go and so on and so forth. And in the particular case of American universities, they got infected by what I think the Assembly Sian Long called woke culture.
Okay.
And that's destroyed them. And those, in fact, paradoxically, you cannot learn very much in these leading American universities because there's so much political correctness. You can't say this, you cannot say this, you can't say this, you cannot say this. Then it destroys learning if you've got to be so politically correct. So in that sense, I would say you don't have to go to the top Ivy League universities anymore, and maybe you won't get as good an environment. And I would say the universities in Singapore today are actually quite amazing.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like that woke culture thing, and earlier you kind of talked about it, right? You had a bit of a reputation when you were in university as a student radical. You even shaved your head, not in protest, but it was seen as that.
Major act of protest.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit about that story?
Well, I mean, I was already a student radical, but when I turned 21, so 1969, I had to go for some Hindu ceremony, and my mother said I had to go to the barber and cut my hair. So I said, what did they do in the old days? He said, in the old days, they shaved themselves bald. So I said, why don't I try shaving bald? So I told the barber, I went to a shop on East Coast Road, I said, shave me bald. And I thought he would slowly cut, and then I could sort of say stop,
Yeah.
But instead he just took the machine and went like this. And before I know it, I had a one bald strip already. I said, okay, no, I cannot turn back. Because actually shaving your head bald I realize is the fastest thing to do.
Yeah.
Because normally when you barber's got to cut, but this is so fast.
Yeah.
Just literally 5 strokes and I was bald.
Yeah. You didn't like the bald look?
No, I was shocked. But everyone in campus assumed I was doing it as an act of protest, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
In fact, my classmates scolded me, said, "You stupid fella. You should have told us, then we'd have taken bets with other people. I'll make Kishore shave his head bald, pay me $10. Instead, could have made a lot of money."
Yeah. So, and I mean, you kind of talked a bit about the woke culture in the US, right? Like students demonstrating and I guess having opinions about some matters. You were in their shoes once in a while. Can you not relate to, what they're doing in the US?
I think I can relate to the political protests. Certainly, I think many people are deeply upset about the killings of innocent civilians in Gaza. I mean, really, too many have been killed. So when the students protest, I can understand that. But woke culture is something quite different, though. Woke culture is about saying, hey, you cannot say something because it may deeply offend an African American or Korean American, and that becomes a form of censorship. And that I think is wrong. So having protests, fair enough. You can protest about anything. You can protest about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. When I was a student in the University of Singapore, National University of Singapore, I walked down Nassim Road to protest at the Russian embassy against the Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia, I think 1968.
Okay.
So I have participated in student demonstrations.
Yeah. Pretty badass. Yeah. I mean, going back to Pris, right? Like, what are you thinking of studying when you go to uni? And how are you making that decision?
Yeah, I think that's why I'm taking this gap year to really figure out what's out there for me. And I mean, I don't know, like I used to study comms back in poly, so naturally we will want to pursue communications. But I think also depending on the industry, I feel like in the media industry, your experience, like hands-on experience, are a bit more valuable as compared to like theory-wise. Yeah, but so I was thinking of maybe diving into something that I could learn, like there's more theory into it. Yeah, so that's why I'm still exploring. I'm not really sure, but I'm still keeping my options open now, basically.
Yeah. What do you have to say about that, Prof? I mean, something a practical degree versus something like philosophy, which I guess many Singaporean parents don't find practical.
No, I mean, if you, for example, if you like some practical profession, whether it's to become a gym trainer, to become a nurse, to become restaurant field, food field, cuisine. I mean, you can do whatever you want to do, but nonetheless, I still think that if you can, at least go and spend 3 years in a university in some field before you jump into your practical thing, because it will give you a base that will make you competitive over the long run. Because at the end of the day, the one big change in human history that has happened, when I started work in the 1960s or 70s, it was assumed that your first job would be more or less your life job, right? That was a general assumption. Now they're no longer life jobs. 20 years from now, you'll be doing a job that doesn't even exist today. So how do you adjust to new jobs? And the way you adjust to new jobs is that you must have a basic university education, and that gives you the foundation. So in my case, my 3 years, now actually 4 years actually 5 years in philosophy, gave me a base of how to argue and how to put forward new ideas that has been proved useful to me for at least 45 years or so. So, it is you have to imagine that you need a very strong base, a very strong foundation. And that's what the university education gives you.
Okay, our second question today, it comes from Rolling Deep, someone using the pseudonym Rolling Deep. And Rolling Deep writes, I have a petty boss who doesn't know how to communicate and manage his own emotions, making me feel a lot of anxiety and thinking a lot when I am doing my work. I need to consider whether he understands what I say. This is from Rolling Deep. Have you ever had you've had quite a varied career. Have you ever had a boss that has been less than understanding?
On the record, no. Off the record, yes.
Can we? Because you said off the record, does that mean we have to cut that out?
No, I know you can keep it in, yeah. No, I've had bad bosses too. It is actually, in life, it's very challenging when you have a boss who doesn't understand. But by the way, just as to quickly add the point that most of my bosses were exceptionally good, by the way.
Yeah, on the record. Yeah.
I mean, seriously. I mean, I can give you their names. I mean, something I already mentioned how Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, Rajaratnam were amazing. They were inspiring bosses. Yeah. But even then, when I work with Foreign Minister Mr. S. Dhanabalan, Foreign Minister Mr. Wong Kan Seng, they really tried to engage me very deeply, and they were very keen to ensure that I felt free to say anything that I wanted to say to them. So I haven't had the experience of having many bad bosses, but it is very challenging to have a bad boss. Very challenging, and that's when the big lesson I learned in life is that you must always create options for yourself.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
You must be able to always walk away from your job, so that you don't become a prisoner of your job. And the way you create options for yourself is, again, by being as well educated as you can be, having a very strong university degree, and then that strong university degree opens so many doors that you don't have to be a prisoner.
Yeah. Who would you say, if you feel like you can say, who would you say is the most demanding boss that you've had your whole career?
Oh, no question, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew.
Okay.
I mean, he didn't suffer any fools, and he expected you to send something to him that was absolutely perfect. And his favorite line was, I don't accept excuses, I only recognize failures. Wow. And you're out. And one of his lines I used when I was the boss to all my staff, and my staff at MFA and Lee Kuan Yew School can confirm this. I said to them, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew used to say, I check, I double check, I triple check, then I check again. So that's how careful he was. And so when you submit something to him, a memorandum, it's got to be absolutely perfect. Because if you make one mistake, you're out. Yeah. And so he expected that kind of very high standard. So as a result of that, he raised the level dramatically.
Wow.
I have a question for that actually, because I hear a lot that, you will only get better from your failures. So how do you actually grow while failing, but also being able to have that opportunity to grow even more?
Well, I mean, you never enjoy failure, by the way. Failures means suffering. But I have always found that whenever I've gone down, subsequently it's been good for me. That you become stronger and more resilient as a result. But I had an unfair advantage because, in my case, my father went to jail, we had debtors coming to our house, so I had a very rough childhood. But I observed a very strong mother. I had a very strong mother who never broke down, right? Even when debtors came to the door and so on and so forth. So when I saw that my mother never broke down, I told myself, I cannot break down. My mother went through such hell. So my mother gifted me with resilience, right? And so in that sense, I had an unfair advantage because no matter how bad the situation I went through, I told myself, nothing I'm going through is as bad as what my mother went through, so I cannot break. So I never broke. And, I tell the story in my memoirs about a 13-year-old classmate of mine, another Indian, with the same situation as mine. His father was drunk. His father was not taking care of the family. His mother and sisters were suffering as a result. At the age of 13, he committed suicide, right? And for me, that was never an option because my mother never committed suicide. My mother never gave up. How can I give up?
I'm curious about, maybe if I can check with you guys, like what Prof said earlier about, I guess, LKY's attitude towards failure. Like, do you think young people these days probably wouldn't like a boss like that, to be honest?
Ooh, that's tough. I think depends on the person, right? If you're working for that sort of boss now and you don't accept it, then are you able to really get into this company or this space? But it's sometimes, I think, depends on the company and the person. They tend to adjust or realize it's a new age.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that's right or I think maybe you can chime in as well. Do people from your generation think it's okay to kind of adjust to the newer generation, especially during workplace ethics or behavior? Yeah.
Well, I think to be fair, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew was focused on trying to raise the level of Singapore. And he realized that he had to smash a lot of bad habits and transform the work culture. So he had to take extreme measures, including, by the way, extreme measures against ministers of state for corruption. So when you're trying to transform a place, it's a bit different from trying to maintain a place. So he was trying to build a nation. So he was much more demanding and much more pushy. And thank God for Singapore. Otherwise, if he hadn't been that pushy, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah. I read in your memoirs that you incurred his ire a few times. Can you tell us about what was the worst incident or the one that was the hardest for you to stomach?
Well, the one that I felt like someone had thrown me into a boxing ring with a heavyweight fighter, but gave me no gloves was when I was my last interview before I was supposed to join the PAP. You know, and I didn't apply for the job. Mr. Dhanabalan asked me to apply for the job. I said, okay, you want me to apply for this job? I applied and I went through. All my interviews were very friendly. Yeah. With Mr. Lim Kim San, with other ministers, they're all very friendly. Then suddenly I went to the cabinet room for the final interview, and I faced a very hostile Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, and I was all alone, and I was completely flummoxed. Like, what's going on here? I thought I'd been asked to apply for this job, and they could have just said, "No, we're not going to give it to you." Fine, I'd have walked out.
Yeah.
But instead, I got a barrage of very hostile questions, and I don't think I handled it very well.
Yeah, so for context, this was when they were considering you as a possible candidate, right?
Yeah, to join the
party.
To join as a member of parliament,
Yeah. And if that interview had gone well, maybe you could be Minister Kishore today. But But you know,
Obviously, I failed.
I mean, when I was reading that, I was thinking like, do you think that that was a tactic by, Lee Kuan Yew to see whether you could take the heat of being questioned as a politician?
I don't know. I don't know. And at the end of the day, I failed. So I didn't go into politics. I didn't become a minister. But as you can see in my memoirs, some of the biggest gifts that I've had are the failures I've had, because I've ended up having in many ways an incredibly successful life, despite all these failures along the way.
So your advice to Rolling Deep would be, to consider hopefully have options, consider whether they want to keep working under someone who seems like an abusive boss, right? But can I ask you more questions about workplace politics in general? Because we get loads of questions about handling workplace politics, right? And you had, I would say, from reading your memoirs, it seemed like you had to navigate a lot of workplace politics. You had one where, if I recall correctly, your boss knew that you were close with Goh Keng Swee, so he asked you to communicate something to him, right? Like, how did you go about navigating all these really big personalities in your workplace?
Well, I must say that if you read my memoirs, you discover that I was very bad at office politics. And I have a very strange combination in my career, because I was, I would say, intellectually very strong in my contribution. So my biggest contribution, I remember once my permanent secretary, Mr. Cha Chong Fook, had to write a cabinet memo and submit it within 3 hours, which is not easy, So he called me to his office and he sat me down and he says, write me a cabinet memo in 3 hours. So I could do it. I could do it in 3 hours, submit a cabinet. So I was strong on the substance. But I was weak in terms of around me, I was accumulating lots of detractors. And I wasn't aware. I was completely unaware that there was office politics. And looking back now, it's clear that I generated a lot of resentment because I had very powerful mentors. And Dr. Goh Keng Swee, for whatever reason, even though I told him I was a pacifist at one time, he was contemptuous about that, liked me. And so as a result of that, people felt that I was being protected by Dr. Goh, and they resented it, but I wasn't aware. I was very naive. And so I would say, if you want to succeed in office politics, do the opposite of what I did.
Okay, wait. Disclaimer, Pris and Alfie haven't read your book yet. I have. There's this crazy story I wanted to ask you about in the book where your first wife had a stillbirth, right? And in the book, he writes that his colleagues at the embassy celebrated the fact that your wife went through something like that.
But I discovered this many years later, though.
Okay. So
I didn't know it then.
in the moment, you had no inkling that they didn't like you?
Yeah, I had no idea. But as I explained in my book, the staff at the High Commission were unhappy with me because I took away a privilege that we all had. We had a privilege of flying to Singapore every week to do the courier run, to carry the classified documents.
Yeah.
That was a very nice privilege. You fly to Singapore, you can get allowances. So there were 18 such trips that unfortunately were given to me because I had to fly down to give lectures to the Ministry of Defense on Marxism. So obviously people must have said, why is he taking away all our trips, our perks,
Yeah.
And I had no choice because Dr. Goh decided I should do it,
Yeah.
So unfortunately I made enemies and detractors.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of the competent jerk versus lovable fool?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you heard about this, Prof? So it was some study that was done that basically wanted to find out whether do people prefer working with someone who's a competent jerk, so someone who's really good at their job but an asshole to everyone, or a lovable fool, so someone who's bad at their job but gets along with everyone. So do you think you were a competent jerk? I mean, you're clearly not a fool because you're so successful, but you were, as you pointed out, not well liked perhaps amongst your peers.
Well, I think certainly there were phases in my life where I did have a lot of detractors.
Yeah. Would you prefer to work with a competent jerk or a lovable fool? What do you think?
Neither.
Neither. So someone who's both likable and competent. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah. No, but I think at the end of the day, it's the key message is you must be able to walk away from your job. It's very critical. Yeah. Because if you are stuck in a job that you're unhappy with, then you end up becoming miserable. So you have to be prepared to make sacrifices if you have to.
So really taking risks and just doing whatever people's afraid of, I guess. Yeah.
Were you ever in that position where you just were miserable in a job and just felt like you wanted to walk away?
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the end of Singapore's term on the UN Security Council, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do next because I already been Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which means I had the number one job. And I already had the most significant diplomatic posting to lead Singapore's team in the UN Security Council, and there was nothing beyond that. So I got acutely depressed, and actually I got massive back pain, and I wasn't able to run, I wasn't able to play golf, I wasn't able to exercise for a whole year. And so I was clinically depressed for a year or so. Then a miracle happened. Dr. Tony Tan, then Education Minister, came to New York and said, "Would you like to become Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy?" I said, "Sure." So that was an incredible
way out kind of that situation.
Actually, I have a question, but going back a little bit about dealing with colleagues and people who didn't like you in the office. How do you do that on like a day-to-day basis? If you unless you were not aware of it at the time.
Yeah, I think in my case, I was more or less oblivious to it, and see, partly because why you must remember we were then in the early 70s. This was a high stress environment. We had to get a lot done, and so the bosses like me because. It's like if they have to write a paper, if they want to send an important paper, if they want to do an analysis or something, they turn to me. So since I was producing good work, I was protected from the detractors around me.
It's a lovable, competent person.
So it's important to be loved by your bosses at the very least, or to have people up there who are looking after you.
No, really, but I must say that some of my bosses were exceptionally kind people, I mean, I gave example, Mr. Dhanabalan, Mr. Wong Kan Seng. They were sort of they were focused on the work, and they also focused on making sure that I was doing all right,
Yeah.
They were very compassionate.
Did you ever want to win over your detractors? Or do you want to win over your detractors now?
Well, I think I wish I had been more aware.
Okay. Is there something you would do
of
differently?
my detractors when at that time. I was quite oblivious to them. But I mean, now at this stage, there's no point.
Yeah.
And the other important thing in life I learned, by the way, which is very critical, never bear a grudge. Because a grudge is like acid in your soul. It burns you up. Doesn't even touch the person you're angry with. So you're pouring acid into your soul while not damaging your detractor.
Yeah.
So you must get rid of all grudges in life.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we can say about your detractors is how many books have they written? Have they written 10 books? Probably not. Have they been published in Foreign Affairs as many times as you? This next segment, we've been calling it Fast Advice. So the aim of it is to give like kind of one-line advice to this question that has been written in. And I think this one is right up your alley. It is from someone named Phantom SG. Phantom SG writes, how to deal peacefully and successfully with the neighbor to stop smoking at the window and to stop dragging furniture or dropping things on the floor. How to deal peacefully with a belligerent neighbor or a destructive neighbor. Prof, you're a diplomat. How can you give one-line advice to Phantom SG? What would you do in this situation?
Well, I would say, the definition of a diplomat is somebody who can tell you to go to hell in such a way that you feel you're going to enjoy the journey to hell.
Okay.
So, actually, for a while, when I was staying in Lagoon View, we did have a neighbor upstairs that was a bit noisy. But we did find that just patient conversations did help.
Okay.
And I would say first try talking, explaining, but you at the same time, the most important thing I learned in life is build up a relationship first.
Okay.
Once you have the relationship, then you can say all kinds of things.
Yeah. So come to some sort of like bilateral agreement to stop smoking at the window and to stop dragging furniture. Yeah. You guys have bad neighbors?
I used to. Dogs, really big dogs. In a HDB flat, I actually don't know how they got, because, I don't know, man. Like, at night, they would just bark, but I think we tried, like my family tried talking to them, and like, sometimes at night your dogs can bark quite loudly, but they were really like aggressive about it also. They're as aggressive as their dogs. So I think the dogs take up after their owner or something, I don't know. But how would you deal with that if, you try to come to a calm solution, like
you try to be friendly with them,
try to be friendly with them, but they just don't budge.
Then I would say then you have to use the formal mechanisms. Either report to the police if they're breaking a law, it's just fair, or reporting to the town council people.
Or make more noise. Make more noise, and then they'll come.
No, that wouldn't solve a problem.
Hold a parade where you show all your weapons.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
I mean, do you think like your career in the Foreign Service or being a diplomat, do you think that's helped you be more diplomatic in regular life?
Yes, I think so. I think I had the great privilege of encountering many good diplomats. And then you observe how they handle difficult situations, And certainly you need diplomacy in no matter what you do, even if you're a nurse, a Grab driver, a policeman even. In theory, you have all the powers, but it's good to learn how to persuade people.
Who was if you don't mind me asking, who was the worst country to deal with? Are you allowed to say?
Worst country to deal with? I would say not. There was no country, because sometimes it's the
very diplomatic answer.
No. Seriously, I give you an example. The United States is very critical of Cuba, and we used to fight Cuba a lot, Singapore and Cuba, during the Cold War era in the 1980s. When we opposed the Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia, Cuba supported the Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia. And I described how in Havana in 1979, Mr. Rajaratnam was very brave the way he fought against Mr. Castro of Cuba. But even though we used to fight the Cubans, we used to respect them. Because the Cubans at the end of the day were doing their job very well. They were very capable. And the Cubans were being bullied by the United States of America, so you could understand why they were doing what they were doing. But the point is, I was able to get along with the diplomats of all countries. So, And that's very important for small states like Singapore.
Yeah. I guess speaking about, your expertise in like world stuff, if you don't mind me asking like a slightly nerdy question, if you guys don't mind me asking this, I suppose many people characterize you as someone who is like pro-China or pro-Chinese. Do you agree with that kind of characterization? Or do you understand where that's coming from?
Well, I can understand where it's coming from because I'm actually engaged in a larger debate that many Singaporeans cannot see, and this is a debate between United States and China contests. And I have found that many of the American allegations against China are not true, factually not true. And so I point out the factual errors. And so when, for example, there's one video that apparently many Singaporeans have seen where this Caucasian questioner says, isn't China oppressing its people, right? I say, if China is oppressing its people, how can 139 million Chinese leave China freely and 139 million people come back to China freely? They don't come back to oppression, right? They have the choice. So, these are factual errors that are made by the Westerners and the Americans. So I'm debating them, but everyone says I'm being very pro-China.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, as actually a very wise Chinese said to me, he said to me, it's funny, this is a Chinese official saying to me, Kishore, you should tell your fellow Singaporeans that you are pro-Singapore and pro-truth.
Okay.
That's my position because I'm not pro-China and I'm definitely not anti-America. In fact, I visit the United States far more often than I visit China. Yeah. I've been invited even just this year to spend time in University of Pennsylvania and go and launch my book in New York and in Harvard. So I actually have much more connection to the United States than I do with China. Yeah. But if you read my book, Has China Won? I'm trying to help the United States by saying, hey, you are completely underestimating your adversary.
Yeah. See, I didn't used to be pro-China until I had the delicious icy treats of Mishue, and now I'm pro-China as well. Have you tried Mishue before?
Tried what?
Mishue.
What's that?
It's a beautiful ice cream shop that's super cheap.
Okay.
Highly recommend.
$1 for one.
You guys like Mishue?
I love
I
it.
love it.
Yeah.
Just the ice cream though.
After this, you should go get some.
I should go and try it.
Yeah. After this, yeah. Okay, I think that's good for fast advice. Okay, we have one last question. This question is from audience member JK. JK writes very simply, how to get rich and have a successful career. How to get rich and have a successful career. What do you think, Prof? How to get rich and have a successful career? Like you, I suppose.
I would say rule number one, work very, very hard. I have met many successful people. And as far as I can tell, the very successful people work 24/7.
Wow, okay.
I'm not exaggerating. And I mean, for example, I can tell you this. When I was permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it was quite routine to get messages from Mr. Lee Kuan Yew on Saturdays and Sundays. And he would expect you to respond fairly quickly because, I mean, he was dealing with a crisis. So he expected you to respond immediately.
Yeah.
And this is in the government sector. But if you are in the private sector, people work as hard as that because it makes a huge difference. If you can, change your product just in time or get it out, and quite often you're going to work over the weekends to get your product just right before you put it on sale.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen somebody who's very successful who doesn't work very hard. And so at the same time, there are people who want to have a better work-life balance, and I said that's fair enough. But in my book, I explain I failed in work-life balance. But the people whom I know who are very successful just work very, very hard, including, by the way, to my surprise, a French ambassador that I traveled with in Africa.
Yeah.
And I discovered that the French ambassador works much harder than the Singapore ambassador. And that was a big shock to me.
That as in yourself, right? Like you're comparing him to yourself. I see. Do you regret? I mean, like you mentioned in your book, you're a workaholic. You worked long hours. You know, at your age now, looking back, do you wish that you could have stopped and smelt the roses a bit more, relaxed a bit more, or no regrets?
Well, the biggest regret I have in my life is that I failed to spend time with my children, especially when they were, young and in their teenage years. Unfortunately, that period of their life, when they went from childhood to adulthood, was also the period of my most successful phase of my career, when I was permanent secretary and all that. So I didn't spend time with them, and that's the biggest regret of my life. So the one piece of advice I have to any parent with young children is spend time with them. Soon they'll be gone.
Yeah, spend time with your children, Chris.
My children?
In the future, if you ever
In the
have children.
future, maybe, yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot about people, focusing on their careers and kind of forgetting why they even do it in the first place, or who they're gonna do it for. So spend time with your loved ones.
I do feel like that kind of idea is changing a little bit with like younger people even younger than me. Like some people are happy just to have, a lot of my friends are happy just to have like a life that's good enough, right? Like, a job that just ends at like 6:30 or 7, and then like enjoy the rest of their time after that, instead of slaving away at work per se. Do you think that, do you think that's a worrying trend, or do you think that that's okay? What do you reckon, Prof?
Sorry, what's a worrying trend?
Like that people are just not willing anymore to work crazy hours perhaps they were in your day.
Well, I can understand that if you have a dull, boring job, let's say if you have a job in the production line, obviously you can't work 24/7 on a production line. But it's different when you are a leader of an organization, or a chief producer in some area, and you're enjoying your job, you're finding it meaningful, then your job is not painful, and in my case, if I am reading late staying up late at night to follow some important geopolitical developments, I'm not suffering, I'm enjoying myself, because studying geopolitics is something that makes me very happy.
Do you guys reckon your friends who are still willing to work like long hours?
My friends are like high salary, lesser hours. I'm going for it.
Yeah.
What would you define as success when you were younger and you were like working hard? Like, what's your success markers?
I would say number one, prestige. So you're given jobs that were considered meaningful. So when I succeeded Tomiko as ambassador to the UN at the age of 35, that was a shock to me, because Tomiko was a legend already, and to be asked to step in his shoes was, wow, really? That was a shock to me. So that obviously, getting a prestigious appointment is important. And then, of course, when you have children, having enough money is important, because at the end of the day, I had to save $600,000 to send my 3 kids to, American universities. It cost me $50,000 per year per child. And I couldn't have saved $600,000 if I hadn't had the jobs. Maybe I could save money.
Do you think it's important, like people our age, we're starting our career paths and everything, we need these kind of markers to kind of encourage us to keep on going?
Or to know where you're at as well.
Do you think it's important for like us to create these markers for ourselves?
Well, I think it's important. The first thing is very important to do a job that you enjoy. And if you're trying to succeed in a job you don't enjoy, you're climbing the wrong ladder. Nothing. At the end of the day, you only have one life. And if you spend your one life doing something you're not enjoying, then you're wasting your life, you know. So to me, it was a complete accident that I ended up in diplomacy and then in academia. But I enjoyed both the jobs I had. But if I hadn't enjoyed the jobs, then I would have been very unhappy. Yes.
I mean, a lot of my friends actually, they kind of pivot towards like jobs that earn them more money rather than jobs they're actually passionate in. So they might have a little bit of like, they're okay with the job, it earns more, they'll go for that rather than like a passion project and trying to go in that way. Well, what do you think about, you know, this kind of shift in mindset with like the younger generation?
Well, it also depends on your life circumstances. If you're young and single, I would say try anything. But if you're married and have young children, then you got to worry about your children too. And then you might, if you have children, then sometimes you may have to make sacrifices and take a job with more money, not for your sake, but for the sake of your children.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you a bit about that because in your book, you know, your first 2 chapters, you talk a lot about the circumstances that you grew up in, and like the poverty basically, and you know the disadvantages I suppose you started out with in life, right? Like you mentioned earlier, your dad was in jail, your mother pretty much single-handedly raised the family. When you going back to our earlier question about like deciding what to study at university, if let's say you're from like a underprivileged background, do you think that there's a case that you should just study something that's super practical, like accounting or something, because that almost guarantees you a certain kind of job, a certain kind of pay? Or would you still advise that person to do something that they love, like even if it's philosophy, that some people might consider, you know, not as employable as accounting?
Well, I mean, but if you do accounting and you're miserable in it, by the way, I know people who enjoy accounting, by the way.
Really? What kind
it's
of
very strange,
freaks are these
they
people?
do, they do. I mean, they love numbers. So, I would say it's a big mistake in life to choose a profession just for the money if you're not enjoying it. It's a huge mistake because life at the end of the day is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? It's a 50-year, 60-year thing you have to do. And you don't want to spend 50 to 60 years of your life doing something you're miserable at. And the lesson I learned in my life is that if you are passionate about something, you end up being very good at it, and you'll find a niche for yourself in which you can excel over others. So, but if you hate the job, you'll never become very good at it.
Yeah. Did you ever speak to your mom about you studying philosophy?
Absolutely not, because my mother, none of my parents went to university. I wasn't supposed to go to university. If I hadn't had the President's Scholarship, I would have ended up as a textile salesman. You know, I mean, but by some miracle I got the President's Scholarship. So I ended up at university. So my mother couldn't guide me on what to do in a university. Yeah. But what I did was clearly, everyone said it was impractical to sacrifice a year. And I gave up I didn't have a President's Scholarship for 1 year. So I had to teach night classes to earn enough money to pay for my school fees. But it was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah. I mean, I find that a really inspiring kind of narrative in your book that, you know, from all the disadvantages that you started with to where you are now, it's really nuts. How much of that would you put down to pure hard work and intelligence, and how much of that would you put down to luck?
I would put down, I mean, certainly being able to do well in school obviously was an asset because I got bursaries and scholarships. Yeah. But I also had a lot of luck. And the fact that I was able to work with Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, Mr. Rajaratnam, and spend a lot of time with them personally, you know, listening to them, interacting with them. It was just pure luck that I learned so much from them. It's amazing, you know. Because if I hadn't had these 3 bosses, I would not be where I am today.
And in your book, you also put it down to the fact that you got at least some of the top brass's attention with like this front page that you published when you were at university. It's like can you tell us a bit about that front page?
Well, I think when I became the editor of the student newspaper, I decided to be provocative. And since the students at the University of Singapore were supposed to be apathetic students, I had created a newspaper with a blank page as a front page. Imagine Straits Times coming to you with a completely blank page and with a small question in small print saying, "Are we really that blank?" ? You know. So it's a way of provoking the students to think. So similarly, I came out with an article after Mr. Lee Kuan Yew came to speak at the NUS, and he got very angry with a philosophy professor who was questioning him too much. And he wanted to move on. And when the student chairman refused to move on, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew pushed aside the student chairman and said, "I'm taking charge."
Wow, okay.
So I said, well, you know, that's not right. So I wrote an editorial called A Question of Decorum, pointing out that when prime ministers push aside student chairman, we're going down the slippery slope towards dictatorship. And of course, that was brave, maybe foolish for me to say that. But as a result of that article, I think people noticed me.
Yeah. Did you ever ask Lee Kuan Yew about that incident?
No, absolutely not.
Were you not scared of him?
Yes, of course. You know, you do get intimidated by him. But you know, I describe in the book how in the 1990s, after he stepped down as Prime Minister, he had more time. Every 2-3 months, he would invite Tomiko, Chan Heng Chee, and me for lunch. And the thing I discovered about Mr. Lee Kuan Yew is that he's the best listener in the world. So when you see him in a public setting, he can be very intimidating, and he has a point of view and he puts it across very forcefully. But when you meet him in a private setting, when the one big asset that Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee and Rajaram had is that they're very curious minds. They had questions on everything. So in private, he would ask all kinds of questions, and he'd be a damn good listener. And he would pick up things incredibly fast. So in that sense, conversations with him were a real joy. And looking back now, those conversations over lunch were a real privilege.
What do you think people of younger generation need to remember about Lee Kuan Yew, looking back on him now?
Well, I think I'm glad you raised that question. It's actually shocking that young Singaporeans are not aware that the founding leaders of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee and Rajaratnam, were not just outstanding leaders by Singapore standards. They were outstanding leaders by global standards. And they were probably more brilliant than the founding fathers of the United States of America. And you know, we've had this great privilege of having 3 exceptional leaders, and we don't understand and appreciate it. So I'm very glad you said just now that you can barely remember Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, and that's fair enough. I mean, when I was 16, I probably didn't know who was a great leader at that time too. But at the same time, it's very important for Singapore's long-term survival to realize that Singapore as a country, has been exceptionally successful. I mean, no other country in human history has been as successful as Singapore has been. I wrote an essay on that when Singapore turned 50 in 2015. And that essay was published in California and was downloaded 400,000 times, and no one challenged my thesis. So if Singapore has been the most successful country ever in human history, the least we can do as Singaporeans is appreciate the fact that we have something really special.
Okay, I mentioned earlier at the top of the show or at the start of the interview that Prof has a new book that's just come out. It's called Living the Asian Century, an Undiplomatic Memoir. I've read it, and I must say that it is a super readable book. I read it faster than my normal reading pace, and I really enjoyed it. It's filled with lots of stories that Prof has shared on the podcast, but if you want to hear more of them, and I think there are some great ones in there. You should get the book. What inspired you to pen your memoirs down?
Well, I think I turned 75 and I decided, well, there has to become a time when you got to share your life story. And of course, it's possible nobody will be interested in it.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd experienced enough, that things of interest. And especially, I wanted to obviously record my deep gratitude in some ways to both my parents, by the way. I mean, even though in theory my father let us down, I realized that life was very unfair to him. He had no parents to bring him up. And he was sent at the age of 13 to Wild West Singapore, where he learned to smoke, drink, gamble.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a chance. So at the same time, in one way, this is a tribute to my parents. That's why I dedicate the book to them. And also, hopefully, a tribute to some of the people who taught me along the way. I mean, especially Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, Rajaratnam. But I must say, lots of good friends and supporters also along the way. Because, success never comes on your own efforts. Success comes from a community supporting you. And I also want to thank the community that supported me.
Yeah. There's a lot of pretty, I would say, spicy kind of stories in there, some behind the scenes stuff. Were you afraid that, anything you wrote in there would piss off someone?
Well, I think a lot of the people that I write about, as you know, are not around anymore. So
You got away with it.
I mean, like Dr. Goh Keng Swee, I quote what he said. When Mr. Lee Kuan Yew used to have big fights with Mr. J.B. Jeyaretnam, and one day Dr. Goh Keng Swee asked me, so what do you think Harry? He called Lee Kuan Yew Harry. What do you think Harry is going to do with J.B. Jeyaretnam, So I said, my mother told me that Mr. Lee Kuan Yew is going to crush J.B. Jeyaretnam. And Dr. Goh laughed and said, your mother is a political genius. She's absolutely right. So, I mean, these kinds of stories. So it's good. It's good to understand that at the end of the day, that even though Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee and Rajaratnam were great men, they were human beings with a sense of humor and with foibles, and they could be friendly and charming, or they could be very tough and disciplined in their work too. Yeah.
And if you could recommend for our viewers out there, and for Alfie and Pris who haven't read the book, I wouldn't begrudge you for that. One chapter in the book that they have to read. Which chapter would you recommend that they have to read from this?
Well, I think they should read the first chapter because it would give them an insight into a Singapore that is so different. I had to... There's one scene down there which I completely forgotten at the age of 10. Around 10, I think, my friend Jeffrey Sung writes a story about at the age of 10, he heard of a commotion in a coffee shop. They went to the commotion in the coffee shop, and there was an Indian man standing down there carrying a broken beer bottle, broken beer glass with blood on his t-shirt, and obviously he got involved in a fight. And then the police came, the crowds came, and then the 10-year-old boy comes and said, Dad, let's go home. And that 10-year-old boy is me. So I don't remember it. But my friend Jeffrey Singh fortunately remembers it. I mean, I remember picking up my father from the drain. I remember my father running to hide under the bed when the Chinese gangsters came to collect debts from our house. So, I mean, I remember some scenes.
Is your house still there?
But my house is still there.
Okay.
You can still see it at 179 Onan Road, which is unusual, by the way. Most houses of that generation have gone. So it's quite remarkable that my house is still standing.
Yeah, I had a pretty weird experience reading your book, right? Because I live in like the Katong area. And then there's that one scene that you described where your dad comes back from jail and you guys are waiting to see whether he'll come to the house and force his way in or whatever. But he just sits at the coffee shop. And I was reading your book while sitting on Joo Chiat Road. And I look up and literally it was near Onan Road. And I was wondering, which coffee shop is it, or which unit would it have been? And it's a really poignant scene. You guys should check it out. I thought that was a very powerful
It's the
moment.
coffee shop right opposite 179 Onan Road.
Okay.
It's still there.
It's still there. Wow. Amazing.
Now it's a Tiong Bahru bakery.
You can imagine an angry man sitting at Tiong Bahru Bakery waiting for his kids. Yeah. Okay, the book, I'm looking at the price tag here, is $38.70. So you guys can find it at all good bookstores. Thank you so much for joining us today, Prof. I hope you had a good time giving advice.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.